A full bus conveying a group of NYSC members who had just finished their 1-year-long service in a village got involved in a very terrible accident on their way back to their respective places, just because of one single mistake. Here's what happened. In a small village, a group of NYSC members lived and worked at the local high school. The corpers were lively, always laughing and making friends with the villagers. But as they stayed longer, their curiosity grew. One sunny afternoon, as they strolled through the dusty village paths, they came across the king's palace. The sight of the tall gates and carved statues filled them with awe. But something caught their attention: a golden crown displayed inside the palace. Its shine was like the sun itself, blinding and beautiful. "It's real gold," whispered Nonso, the greediest of them all, his eyes glowing with greed. "Do you know how much this could sell for in the city?" Another corper, Kemi, shook her head. "Don't even think about it. I've heard stories about this village. They say the king's crown is protected by charms and spirits. No one who steals it ever survives." But Nonso laughed, his voice dripping with pride. "Charms, spirits, those are just stories to scare people. This crown is our ticket to wealth." Some of the corpers were tempted, but others were afraid. "We shouldn't touch it," pleaded Kemi. "The village respects their traditions. Let's not bring trouble upon ourselves." But Nonso had already made up his mind. "If you're too scared, fine, but I'm taking it. And when I'm rich, don't come crying to me." The days passed, and the end of their service drew near. On their last day in the village, while everyone else was busy preparing to leave, Nonso made his move. In the dark of the night, when the stars were asleep and the village was silent, he sneaked into the palace with 2 other corpers who couldn't resist the thought of quick money. The crown sat there, gleaming like a treasure in a dream. "It's even more beautiful up close," said one corper, his voice trembling. "Hurry," whispered Nonso, snatching the crown and tucking it into a black nylon bag. "Let's get out of here." When they returned, Kemi saw the bag in Nonso's hand. "You didn't," she gasped. "We did," Nonso grinned, his voice full of pride. "And I'm not returning it." "You're making a mistake," Kemi warned, her eyes wide with fear. "You don't understand this village. You don't know what you've done." But Nonso shrugged. "Mistake? The only mistake is not taking it sooner." The next morning, the corpers boarded a chartered bus, ready to leave the village. The sky was bright, and the villagers waved goodbye, their faces filled with smiles. Kemi and some few others prayed for protection at the start of the journey, but Nonso and his friends ignored them, laughing and taunting Kemi, calling her Mommy G.O. Nonso sat at the back, his bag tucked beneath his seat, and a smug grin spread across his face. He could already see the riches waiting for him in the city. But as the bus rumbled down the dusty road, the crown's golden glow remained hidden, a silent witness to the greed that had set their fate in motion. The bus rumbled down the bumpy road, carrying the corpers away from the village. The morning sun shone brightly, casting long shadows of the bus on the dry, red earth. Laughter and chatter filled the air as the corpers joked about their time in the village. But Nonso sat at the back, quiet, his bag tightly clutched under his seat. The crown inside seemed to hum with a strange energy, though only Nonso could feel it. Suddenly, the bus jolted. It came to a halt with a loud groaning sigh. The engine sputtered and died. "What's happening?" one of the corpers asked, leaning out of the window. "The bus has spoiled," the driver muttered, climbing down to check. Sweat dripped from his forehead as he poked around the engine. Hours passed under the hot sun as the driver tinkered, grumbled, and cursed under his breath. Finally, the bus roared back to life. Relieved, the corpers cheered as the journey continued. But soon after, a loud pop shattered their joy. The tire has burst, the driver announced, his face twisted with frustration. He walked quickly to replace it, muttering prayers under his breath. The corpers were restless, fanning themselves with their hands as the heat bore down on them. Still, no one noticed Nonso's bag or the hidden crown that lay inside, its silent presence casting an unseen shadow over them all. With the tire fixed, the bus was back on the road. But as the miles rolled by, an uneasy silence fell over the group. The wind that once felt warm now carried a chill. Nonso glanced around nervously but kept quiet. Then, out of nowhere, the brakes failed. The driver's panicked shouts filled the air as he struggled to control the speeding bus. "Hold on tight," he yelled, but his voice was drowned by the screams of the corpers. The bus swerved wildly before plunging into a deep ditch. The crash was deafening. Dust and debris filled the air, mingled with cries of pain. When the chaos settled, 3 corpers lay lifeless, their dreams and laughter snuffed out like candles in the wind. Others groaned, their bodies bruised and broken. Rescuers arrived quickly, pulling the injured from the wreckage. But as they counted the survivors, one person was missing, Nonso. Maybe he was thrown from the bus, one corper suggested, his voice trembling. Or burned in the fire, another whispered, shuddering. But Nonso wasn't dead. He had slipped away from the crash, clutching his bag tightly to his chest. His legs carried him far from the wreckage, his heart pounding with fear and guilt. The golden crown, still hidden in his bag, seemed heavier than ever, as if it knew the blood that had been spilled because of it. And as Nonso fled, the shadow of his greed followed him, waiting to strike again. Nonso hurried away from the wreckage, his legs like the wind as he fled from the disaster. After hours of walking, he finally found another bus heading to his city. Relief washed over him as he boarded, clutching his bag tightly to his chest. The new bus rolled along the road, smoothly at first. Nonso leaned back, thinking of the money he would make from selling the golden crown. But soon, the bus began to shake. "Driver, what's happening?" a passenger shouted. The driver slammed the brakes, but the bus wouldn't stop. It veered to the side of the road before jerking to a halt. The passengers tumbled forward, shouting in fear. "It's the brakes," the driver muttered, shaking his head. "They failed." The passengers groaned, climbing out of the bus as the driver inspected it. Nonso stayed silent, his heart racing. He knew something was wrong, but he refused to let go of the crown. After hours of delay, Nonso finally reached home, his bag heavier than ever. As he stepped into the house, his youngest brother, Toba, ran to greet him. "Brother Nonso," Toba shouted, his laughter like music. Nonso forced a smile and patted Toba's head. "Go and play, Toba," he said quickly, heading to his room to hide the crown. But misfortune had already crept into the house, like a thief in the night. That evening, as Toba bathed, he slipped on the wet floor. His head struck a wooden shelf, and he fell silent. By the time the family found him, it was too late. Toba was gone. The house was filled with wails of sorrow. Nonso sat quietly in a corner, his face pale, his hands trembling. He clutched his knees as guilt gnawed at his heart like a rat. As the night deepened, strange cries began to echo through the house. It was not the cries of mourning, but something darker. Ghostly whispers floated through the air, chilling the family to their bones. The wind howled like a wild beast, and the air grew heavy with fear. "What is happening?" Nonso's mother whispered, clutching her wrapper tightly around her shoulders. Then the next blow struck. Nonso's father, strong and proud like an old Iroko tree, suddenly fell ill. His body stiffened and he could no longer move. "It's stroke! Call the prophet!" Nonso's mother cried, her voice shaking. The prophet arrived swiftly, his face grim as he examined the father. He spoke in a low, steady voice. "Someone has taken what does not belong to them. Until it is returned, this family will know no peace." The family stared at one another, confused and terrified. Nonso sat frozen, his heart pounding like a drum. Who took it?" the prophet demanded, his eyes scanning each member of the family. "I didn't take anything," Nonso lied, his voice barely a whisper. The prophet narrowed his eyes but said nothing more. He left the family with a warning. If what was stolen is not returned, this is only the beginning. As the family mourned Toba and worried over their father, Nonso slipped away to his room. He unwrapped the crown and stared at its golden surface. "It's just a crown," he muttered to himself, his voice trembling. "Tomorrow, I'll sell it and use the money to fix everything. It'll all be fine." But deep down, Nonso knew the truth. The golden crown was no ordinary treasure, and his greed had unleashed a storm he could no longer control. As the morning sun rose, Nonso's heart was heavy, but his greed remained stronger. He wrapped the golden crown in a black cloth and stuffed it into his bag. "Today, I'll sell it," he whispered to himself, his voice shaky. He stepped out of the house, his family still mourning, and made his way to the market. The road was long and dusty, but Nonso marched on. The bag on his back felt heavier with each step, as though the crown was fighting to stay in the village. Then it began. From the corner of his eye, he saw a shadow dart across the road. He froze and turned, but there was nothing there. His steps quickened, but the shadows followed. "Nonso," a voice called. He stopped dead in his tracks. It was faint but familiar. Turning slowly, he saw a figure in the distance. It was Toba, his little brother. But Toba's eyes were hollow, his face pale. "Return the crown, brother," the ghostly figure whispered, his voice carrying the wind. Nonso stumbled back, his heart pounding like a drum. He turned and ran, but more ghosts appeared, their faces twisted in sorrow. Some he recognized, others were strangers. As he reached the market, Nonso thought he was safe, but suddenly, out of nowhere, masquerades burst into sight. Their tall, colorful figures loomed over him, their whips cracking through the air. "Thief!" they shouted. "Return what you stole!" The first whip struck his back and Nonso screamed. Another lash and he fell to his knees. He begged, but the masquerades showed no mercy. "Please," he cried, "I'll return it." But no one else could see the masquerades. To the townspeople, Nonso was thrashing on the ground, screaming and shouting at invisible enemies. "Is he mad?" someone whispered. Nonso's voice rose above the noise of the market. "I stole the king's crown," he shouted, tears streaming down his face. "I stole it!" The crowd gasped. Whispers turned into murmurs, and murmurs became shouts. "He stole from the village king." Nonso, still being flogged by the unseen masquerades, staggered toward the prophet's hut. His cries filled the air as the masquerades followed, their whips cracking like thunder. Nonso burst into the prophet's house, falling to the floor. The room smelled of herbs and smoke, but to Nonso, it felt like a sanctuary. "Help me!" he cried, clutching his bag tightly. "The masquerades won't stop. They're flogging me." The prophet, calm and stern, watched him with sharp eyes. "What did you do, boy?" Nonso trembled, his voice barely above a whisper. "I took the king's crown. It's here, in my bag." The prophet shook his head, his voice low and grave. "Do you know what you have done? That crown is tied to the spirits of the village. You've brought a curse upon yourself and your family." Nonso fell to his knees. "Please, I'll return it," Just make them stop. The prophet reached for his tools and began a ritual. He muttered chants, waved leaves, and sprinkled powder over Nonso. For a moment, the air grew still and the masquerades disappeared. You have 3 days, the prophet said, his tone serious. Return the crown to the king, or the curse will consume you and your family. This is your only chance. Nonso nodded, clutching his bag, but as he stepped outside, the masquerades reappeared. They cracked their whips, and Nonso screamed in pain. No bus would stop for him. Drivers thought he was mad. With no choice, Nonso began to walk back to the village. Step by painful step, the masquerades flogged him, their voices echoing in his ears. Return the crown, they chanted. Nonso's journey was long and tortuous. His legs weak, his back raw from the lashes. But he pressed on, knowing that the crown had to go back to where it belonged, or he would never find peace again. For 2 long days, Nonso walked. His body was weak, his back raw from the whips of the invisible masquerades. His legs wobbled like sticks, but he kept moving. The path to the village seemed endless, and the crown in his bag felt like it weighed more than the world. As Nonso approached the village gates, the air grew heavier. The masquerades, still following him, cracked their whips one last time and disappeared into thin air. Nonso stumbled into the village, his clothes torn, his face streaked with tears and sweat. The villagers were waiting. The king stood at the palace gates, surrounded by his elders and guards. They had known he would come back. They always did. The golden crown had a way of calling its thief home. Nonso dropped to his knees, his body trembling. He unwrapped the crown and placed it before the king. Forgive me, your majesty, he sobbed. I was blinded by greed. I thought I could escape, but I've paid dearly for my foolishness. The king looked at Nonso, his face calm but stern. You have brought great sorrow upon yourself and your family, he said. The spirits do not forgive easily. You have returned the crown, but the price you've paid is heavy. Nonso's heart sank as he remembered his youngest brother and his father. Tears streamed down his face as he bowed his head in shame. The villagers murmured among themselves. Some were angry, others pitied Nonso, but the king raised his hand, silencing them. He has returned what belongs to us. His greed has already punished him more than we ever could. Just as Nonso prepared to leave, a messenger arrived, panting and wide-eyed. Your father has passed, the man said. He died this morning. Nonso's knees buckled and he collapsed to the ground. His grief was like a storm, crashing down on him with no mercy. The villagers lowered their heads, for even they felt the weight of his loss. Nonso left the palace, his heart heavy with sorrow. Each step away from the village felt like a stone being added to the burden he carried. He thought of Toba's laughter, now silenced forever. He thought of his father, strong and proud, now gone because of his foolishness. I cannot go home, Nonso whispered to himself. What home is there for me now? He wandered aimlessly until he reached a large river near the village. The water was calm, reflecting the sky like a mirror. Nonso stood at the edge, staring at the rippling surface. His mind raced with memories, the joy he had stolen from his family, the lives lost in the bus crash, the fear he had caused in the village. The crown, now back in its rightful place, had taken everything from him. I have nothing left, he said, his voice barely audible over the gentle rush of the river. Without hesitation, Nonso stepped into the water. The river embraced him, pulling him deeper and deeper until he disappeared beneath its surface. The ripples faded, and the water returned to its calm, quiet state after drowning him. When the villagers learned of Nonso's fate, They shook their heads in sorrow. His story spread far and wide, whispered by old women to their grandchildren, told by fathers to their sons. Let this be a lesson, they would say. Greed is a fire that consumes everything. It spares no one, not the thief, not their family, not their future. And so the tale of Nonso and the stolen crown lived on, a warning to all who dared to defy the traditions and spirits of the land. I hope you enjoyed the tale. If so, please like the video, share it with your family and friends, comment on it, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell for more enchanting tales like this one. Goodbye.